Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 184 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome back to the show. As promised, this is going to start into you want to shoot better, you want to shoot more accurately, and my advice to every shooter out there is to go with the smallest caliber that you think you can get by with. Now, I'm not a minimalist saying you should take a 22 rimfire out and harvest big game animals, but what I am saying that with 20 years under my belt or plus of teaching long-range shooting and teaching marksmanship and teaching precision shooting, that I find that most people, when they back off the caliber a little bit, will increase their accuracy by multitudes. I mean, you have a multiplier of 2, 3, 4, 5 in there of just their ability to put the shot where it wants to go. So this podcast is going to start that whole series off, and we're going to be talking about the small 224 calibers to start. Before we get started, I want to say thank you to Trigger Tech. They are a maker of fine rifle triggers. They make single stage, two stage. They make straight shoes, curved shoes, including right up to the Trigger Tech Diamond, which we find to be one of the best triggers on the market for competition shooting. They also make triggers for lots of different makes and models. We love them here because they're safe, they're easy to install, and easy to adjust by the end user that can't get themselves into trouble by adjusting it. So if you want to upgrade your rifle and you want to do it with a trigger, we recommend stopping over to triggertech.com. That's triggertech.com today. We'd also like to thank Krieger Barrels, maker of some of the finest American-made barrels in the world, and they offer a new program called Krieger Direct, where you can log on, have your barrel in as little as 2 to 3 business days. So they're a family-owned and operated business. They're one of the oldest benchless barrel makers in the world, and they, in our minds, are the finest American-made barrels that you can buy. So if you want the best and you need it now, stop over to KriegerBarrels.com. That's KriegerBarrels.com today. So near and dear to my heart is the love of marksmanship and accuracy. And we talked about this over the last couple of classes. Of course, our shooting schools are kicking off full force. And, you know, I've been privy to watching shooters from big calibers to switching them to a smaller caliber to switching them to a school rifle. I've watched thousands of shooters bring rifles to the school, big magnums, hunting rifles, shooting right beside what used to be our old 223s, and just get dusted for the ability to shoot them and shoot them well. I would tell you that the lowest shooting score ever in our long-range shooting school was shot by a ultralight 7 WSM, in which case he still holds the record. Now, he came back the following year with a much smaller caliber and took our Top Gun hat, and came back the following year after that with his grandson, took the hat again. So when you start talking about this subject, I'm not here to preach or teach or to tell you what you have to do or should consider. I love the art of marksmanship, and I love to be able to get the best out of people shooting and their abilities. And I find that here's my rules when it comes to shooting, especially when it comes to big game animals. Rule number 1 is shot placement. You have to have a caliber that you can shoot exceptionally well. Rule number 2, bullet selection. You have to have a bullet that will perform, and we're going to bring some interviews on and talk about some of the pros and cons of the different bullets and what they leave you vulnerable to. So shot placement, then you've got bullet selection. The third part is velocity. You've got to have speed, especially in some of the smaller calibers. You have to keep the shots closer because you want that energy on target. You want that cavitation to happen. That's where a lot of the damage is done internally, right? So you've got shot placement, you've got bullet selection, you've got bullet speed. So rule number 4, if I had to pick out a fourth rule, would be energy on target, right? So we have to take into consideration the energy on target at the different distances, and that's a combination of caliber, bullet speed, and bullet selection, right? And then the last part is, in my humble opinion, your ability to shoot it well, and picking a caliber that you can shoot well to accomplish rule number 1. So rule number 5 was you have to have a caliber that you shoot well, shoot really well. Rule number 6 is if you can't shoot it really well, like rule number 5 refer to rule number 1. And you have to pick a caliber that you can put the shot where it's supposed to be. So let's go over that list again, just to cover why we're talking about this, right? Rule number 1 is shot placement. Rule number 2 is you have to have a good bullet construction. Rule number 3 is going to be your velocity. Rule number 4 is the energy on target. Rule number 5 is a caliber that you can shoot well. Rule number 6, if you can't competently put the shot where it's supposed to go or have good quality shot placement, which is rule number 1, of course, then relook at rule number 5, your ability to shoot the caliber well, and start selecting a smaller caliber. So if you cannot accomplish rule number 1, first thing you do is start looking at rule number 5 and then start customizing that caliber to have the things that you need to accomplish. So think about your bullet selection. You've changed calibers. Now let's talk about bullets you can get to perform better in the smaller caliber. Let's talk about some of the speeds that you can get and energy on target. All these things play collectively. Now I'm going to start with small calibers, and this podcast is going to be on the sub 22 or 224 calibers that I would consider starting points. And I'm going to go over this list here. I'm going to give you a little bit of history about them, but I'm also going to tell you that I have a lot of history with these calibers. So my grandfather and my dad have all shot all of these calibers that I'm talking about and have these rifles still today. Some of them are the parent base for some of the calibers that they still shoot today. And so I'm not telling you something that I've read on the internet. I'm telling you that I've eaten and many of deer shot with these calibers. I watched my uncles, who are just a couple years older than me, grow up and learn to shoot with these calibers. So we're talking about small 224 calibers, and then the next episode we're going to be talking about the big guns in 224 that I would consider hunting calibers for new shooters, younger shooters, or for shooters that just don't like to have the living daylights kicked out of them, right? So the first one I'm going to throw out here is called the 22 Hornet. Now, my grandfather has passed, right? His 22 Hornet is now in my uncle's hands. He has killed, I can't tell you how many deer with this rifle. Him, my uncles, that when they were growing up, this was the caliber that they chose to shoot. Now, it was introduced commercially in 1930. It was very inexpensive to shoot. It's sort of a goofy looking case, but it was like a rimfire that you could reload. So it was sort of cutting edge in the fact that you could actually reload this cartridge and get better performance in a 22 mag. So it's considered a 22 Hornet. Now, one of the things that I can tell you about the 22 Hornet is it was used by the U.S. Air Force in World War II. It has a history in shooting. It was produced from 1930 to the present. And one of the things that's sort of fascinating about it is its bullet selections and, of course, its energy on target. Now, we're going to go back and talk about energy on target here in just a minute, but of course, shooting a 45 or 50 grain bullet, you're running right around 27 to 2,800 feet per second with factory loaded ammunition, and you're going to be hovering right around 800 to 900 foot-pounds of energy, depending on the bullet that you're choosing. So would I consider the 22 Hornet the ultimate deer cartridge? My answer would be no. I mean, I don't think it's the first choice for big game hunters. Would I say this is a good woodchuck round? Absolutely. How about a turkey? Absolutely. How about a kid learning to shoot? Without a doubt, I would tell you wholeheartedly that my grandfather hunted with a 22 Hornet until the day he died. I mean, that was his cartridge, and he has shot many, many, many deer with it. Now, you're going to go on, if you read any history about it, the 22 Hornet became really popular because people could shoot it. It wasn't a 30-06 walloping the daylights out of them. People could shoot the cartridge well. And it began to become really popular. Like a lot of people, Central Pennsylvania, were using 22 Hornets to go out and shoot deer. But that said, the famous Jack O'Connor, who was a famous writer, decried. He cried like crazy, saying that there's nobody ever in any responsible way should be harvesting deer with a 22 Hornet. So thanks, Jack O'Connor, for killing it here and trying to say that you need more testosterone. And I get it why he was saying that. But it was growing in such popularity as a deer harvesting round that even the famous Jack O'Connor had to come out and defame people for using it because it didn't fit his calibers or his selections that he thought was ethical for killing animals. But that said, up into the 90s, my grandfather still harvested them with the 22 Hornet. Now, keep in mind, we're talking about close range shots. We're talking about thick Pennsylvania brushwoods where we're shooting something at 50 and 75 and 110 yards. We're talking about bullets going exactly where it's supposed to be. My grandfather would shoot them right in the head, right in the neck. I don't ever remember him calling anybody and ever asking, or, meeting for lunch in the farmhouse, him ever asking anybody to come and chase his deer. And, I'm 52 now. Granted, my memory might not serve me the greatest, but I don't ever remember my grandfather ever coming in for lunch, which is a tradition that we had in deer season, to the farmhouse, asking anybody to come and help him find his deer. So 22 Hornet, that would be a small 224 caliber, but I think it would be a great choice for a young kid shooting turkeys, shooting woodchucks. I mean, it's been around forever. You'll find it, gun shows, probably ammunition everywhere. It's not popular at all. The 223, of course, totally overshadows it, but there's a good cartridge. Now, another one I want to bring up here, which is sort of fascinating and has a big history on its own, is the famous triple deuce, or the 222. Now, my grandfather also had a 222, and I remember as a young kid through my late, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, I remember my uncles and my dad out there teaching my uncles, and they would take the 222 out deer hunting, right? And it had been passed through so many hands. I don't know where the rifle's at anymore, but it has been passed through so many hands that I can't tell you how many deer it's harvested, right? Now, would I recommend it for an adult that could handle a big caliber? No, but I'm saying let's start at the smallest calibers that I think would be acceptable for super small shooters, super young shooters, things that people don't talk about. And the reason I started with these small 224s is because I actually have a history with them. I know the calibers well, and I know what they've done, right? So the 222 was sort of an interesting cartridge. Now, it came out a little bit later in life, so it went into service in 1950. It really was getting the performance up. And so they were able to get the heavier bullets, or let's just say the 50 to 55 grain bullets over 3,000 feet per second, right? So we're talking a 50 grain bullet at 3,200 feet per second. And now we're getting into 1,100 foot-pounds of energy, right? So certainly a big step up from the 22 Hornet. By the way, the 22 Hornet also was a very famous fur-taking round for, let's just say, foxes and coyotes and coons and all these other things that people would go out and try to do trapping or fur-taking with. The interesting thing with the 222 is that it was the bench rest cartridge of choice. So not only was it a great cartridge for taking up to reasonable sized animals, right? But it was crazy accurate. It sat world records in bench rest for decades. And it wasn't until later in life that the famous PPC took over and started becoming the bench rest caliber of choice. But prior to that, it was the famous 222. So again, history with it in my family for decades. I know that both my grandfather, my uncle, my great uncles, even in really hard times, I remember them sitting around and talking about through the 50s and 60s when things were tough, steel mills were going down. There wasn't a lot of work here in central Pennsylvania. I remember my grandfather and my great uncle and all them talking about, some people coming up and they would ask if they could take a deer, of course illegally, but harvesting it because they needed food, right? People were on hard times, bad luck. And it was a 222 and a 22 Hornet that harvested many deer by moonlight, and that meat was given away to those in need. I remember even into the 70s that my great uncle would allow people to come up that were on hard times and come in and get a cup of coffee, and then sneak out and a little pop, and then there would go a deer for somebody to eat and to share with their family. And this is central Pennsylvania. This is how it was. It wasn't harvesting for trophies or anything like that. But I remember many times them sitting around the table when I was super young and just listening in fascination to all the stories of all the times that they've allowed this to happen on their property just because there was a family in need. And they would either give it to the family or they would actually go and take the deer and they would actually deliver it to the family that was on hard times. That's pretty cool, right? The other one, you got to throw it out there, is the 221 Fireball, which was loosely based off the 222. My dad hunted deer with it. We still have it. My dad still has the caliber today in the handgun that he's had since the 70s. 221 Fireball, again, a great varmint round. I wouldn't advertise these things and saying, well, this is the cartridge you should go and pick. What I'm saying is let's start at the smallest calibers I think that we could get by with a 9-year-old or a 12-year-old that wants to go out and have fun and shoot. They They don't need to have a 30-30 or 308 or even a 243 for that matter. These are the smallest subcalibers that I would say let's take a look at. Now, last but not least, of course, is the 223. I'm going to stop the small 224 conversation at the 223 because I think that's sort of the precipice of those calibers. The 223 in my mind is like the ultimate caliber for modern day. Think of the 22 Hornet or 222, which is sort of obsolete in the way that you're not going to find ammunition everywhere. It's not easy to find loaded or even reloading opponents for them. I mean, it's out there, but of course the 223 5.56 just absolutely overshadows it in every way, shape, or form, as well as the numerous amount of rifles that you can choose from. But now we talk about a caliber that has the potential with the right twist rate. So think of like a 1 in 7.7 twist that you can now shoot 60 to 75 grain bullets. You can get speeds, even with those heavier 75 grain bullets and a longer barrel, getting close to 2,900 to 3,000 feet per second, and potentially getting your foot-pounds of energy closer to that 1,500 foot-pound mark, depending on your selection of powders and barrel length and speeds. But between that 12 and 13, 14, 1,500 foot-pound mark is where it's going to fall. The nice part about it is there's a lot of hunting ammunition made that's readily available. Think of like your solids, your Barnes, cutting-edge bullets using a 60-grain solid. I mean, these things are designed to break bones, punch your animals, and then just increasing that shot distance a little bit. So, rather than it being a 100-yard gun and in, could you shoot a deer at 150 yards with a 223? I mean, and put the shot where it's supposed to go? I think you can with the right bullet and shot placement. When we start talking about these things, though, we always have to keep it in perspective, right? So if you go back through history and what they talk about with the amount of foot-pounds of energy that you need on animals, it used to be a minimum of 1,000 foot-pounds for elk and 500 for deer. That was what they wanted. Now, if you go on to like Colorado Parks and Wildlife, they're going to say they recommend 1,500 foot-pounds for elk and they recommend 1,000 foot-pounds for deer. But even at that, all these calibers are hovering at that 1,000 foot-pounds. Now, it's the new number. The old number was a minimum of 500 foot-pounds of energy. And I think elk at one point, they were saying, minimum of 1,000. So we've upped that, of course, over the years, saying, well, now we have to hit them with a lot more energy. But that said, even using right off of Colorado Parks and Wildlife's website, they're saying a minimum recommendation of 1,500 foot-pounds for elk and minimum recommendation for any type of deer-sized animal will be 1,000. Well, we're above that 1,000. And really, in the right combination, you might be getting close to that 1,500. So my point to this podcast here is to say, okay, we're going to start with the smallest calibers, and keeping in mind I'm talking about taking an 8-year-old girl out and getting her ready for deer season, or a 12-year-old child, or introducing your wife or your better half to long-range shooting or precision shooting or marksmanship, or just wanting to get a partner to go out to the range with you and start enjoying this. You set your 9-year-old son behind a 308, and he's going to shoot it because you told him to, right? And he cracks that round off, there's a good chance you've lost your hunting partner for the rest of your life. I've seen this. I can't tell you how many times over the years where new shooters are being brought in, or family members are bringing on new shooters, bringing them into the hunting. So they're introductory, and the first thing they do is they hand them a rifle that kicks the shit out of them. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, my God, you're shooting yourself in the foot in the fact that you're going to scare that kid, and he's not going to shoot for shit. I mean, that's just simply how it's going to be. But the other problem is that he's going to be scared, and he's going to possibly just walk away and say, dude, I can shoot on a video game all day long, and it doesn't feel like this, right? So we have many things competing for our next generation's attention, some of it good, some of it bad. But if you make it a bad experience right out of the gate, and you hand them a rifle for deer season that they don't enjoy shooting, and that hurts them, they're out. Mentally and physically, they're going to check out as soon as they get the opportunity to leave. So my daughter, I started off with a 22 Cricket. And then she moved up from there. Her first real bolt action rifle was a 223, and that's what we took deer hunting. And I will tell you that the 22 Hornet, 221 Fireball, and the 222 are all still in service with my family. And they have them. I don't know when's the last time they were actually broken out and shot. And with deer, of course, everybody changes calibers and gets new guns, sort of like a new suit and tie. But I can tell you, if you added the amount of deer that were harvested with just those 3 calibers, with just those 3 rifles, you could probably fill a dump truck. Maybe 2, maybe 3. And I can tell you that I don't remember any of them asking for help to look for their animals after they've shot. So when you think about selecting your caliber, take that list that I'm talking about seriously. Like, it is shot placement first above all else. The guide who wants you to buy the biggest caliber known to man, just in case it's a bad shot, is almost ensuring that it's a bad shot. And I always remind people, tell the guide, look, you're mandating that I bring a 300 Ultra Mag minimum in a hunting weight rifle. I can't shoot that. I will come out with a 6.5 Creedmoor. I will keep my shots within distance. And when you put a target up at 100 and 200 yards, I'll center punch it to show you that I know what I'm doing with this rifle. And you will not chase my animal. And if that doesn't fly, then you pull out the old get out of jail free card, and then you remind them who's writing the check, right? Like, I paid for this hunt. Please trust me that I know what I'm doing, that I'm not coming out there to hurt an animal. I know my limits. I'm not coming out to do ultra long sticks. I am not a magnum shooter. This is what I shoot, and I will put that shot on that animal exactly where it's supposed to go. So I am trying to promote in my later years in life, and just going over what we've learned in the long-range shooting school, how often students will shoot so much better by bringing the caliber down. And I've had everything from 9-year-olds come through the school to 67 and 75-year-old people come through the school for the first time. And I'll give you a great example is we had some customers come in from North Pole, Alaska for the very last class. And it was a husband-wife team. And he was super excited. I spoke with him about 2 or 3 days ago. She wasn't even sure if she's going to have fun, right? She's coming to a long-range shooting school. And in her mind, her expectations are, maybe this isn't going to be that much fun. Maybe I'm not going to enjoy it. There's a lot of question marks. If the first crack through the gun would have hit her and hurt her or scared her, she's out. She left the school excited to shoot. She shot great. She came within 15 points of taking our Top Gun hat on her own, and she's never shot beyond 100 yards. She was decimating everybody on the precision stuff. She lost 1 or 2 shots in some of the speed stuff because she took her time and made the shots count, but she shot the smallest group on test day. She was the only one to do the cold bore and follow-up shot on test day with almost perfect center shots, right? So on her own, I didn't interfere, but she did it because she had a caliber that she had fun shooting. She had a rifle that she had fun shooting. She wasn't afraid of it, and she concentrated now on her abilities rather than concentrating on the pain and suffering that's going to come with the rifle. And so I can play that story over in my head 1,000 times of different people that have come through. That she left here, she's going to be a shooter. I'll guarantee she's going to have a rifle. I'll guarantee she's going to go hunting. I'll guarantee it when she's at the range with her husband. She's not going to be there just participating with him. I think she's going to be there to give him some competition, right? And she's going to be proactively enjoying it, not there just because she feels obligated. And when he called after the school and got back home, and he was like, she loved it. It wasn't anything she shot she was going to be. She had a great time. She was very comfortable. She learned so much. She didn't know that this was shooting. She didn't know that this was shooting. She didn't know that this was fun. She didn't know that, how addictive this sport is when you're hitting steel at 600 and 700 yards. So when we talk about trying to promote stuff like this, I'm talking about getting people in and starting in it in a fun situation, and then grow and learn and change and grow in calibers as you're able to enjoy them, right? And you eventually know your own limits. That's the biggest part. So the next podcast we're actually going to dive into the big 224. So ones I would consider great choices, regardless of what you're hunting, regardless of your shooting abilities, and regardless of how new you are. These are the experienced guy that's 60 years old that just wants a fun gun to shoot, keeping a shot within reasons. The game has changed because of the calibers that we now have to choose from and the horsepower that they have behind them, the velocities that we can run out, which the velocity is king in this, and then the bullets that we have to choose from. It's like we have got the perfect combination for a real-world medium to big game cartridge that is just flat out fun to shoot. Now, before I continue on, I do want to thank our last sponsor. I want to thank MDT. They're a maker of fine rifle chassis. They make a lot of great different makes and models. The new one that comes to mind is Timber. We're going to be doing a review on that. We're actually building that rifle as we speak. So they offer these for different makes and models of rifles, and I think upgrading your rifle stock to get you to fit better or fit perfectly is a huge deal. So if you shoot a factory rifle and you want to upgrade your shooting game, I'm going to recommend that you do it by upgrading your chassis or upgrading your stock. And you can look at all the fine selection at mdttac.com. That's mdttac.com. It is one of the reasons why the school has been so successful as it is that we're able to actually adjust these rifles to fit the students properly. And that is, we have stocks that are fully adjustable. So if you don't have a stock that's fully adjustable, it's a good investment. We think it's going to allow you to get more out of your rifle, and you're going to be a lot more comfortable shooting it. So you can learn more at mdttac.com. That's mdttac.com today. So the online long-range shooting school, I just want to throw it out there that you have until June 1st to register for our discounted pricing. So for the first 2.5 years we've been filming it, we offered the online long-range shooting school at a discount at 70% off. That runs until June 1st. It is our long-range shooting school that you can attend from the convenience and comfort of your own home. So it's the last call, last opportunity to log in and join at our discounted prices. It is 70% off. And then June 2nd, it goes to our normal price. And then we recommend if you attend the school, you can learn more about it at Wolf Precision. Go to our online long-range shooting school page. You can register there, but then also attend the classes from there. So you'll see that all of the episodes that are highlighted in blue, those are actually live classes. You can click on any of them. But we recommend that you take the class in chronological order from our actual website page. That way you can go through in order, or you can go back and refresh on any subjects you want to learn more about. So don't miss out. This is your last opportunity. Prices will change back to normal pricing on June 2nd. So you can log into wolfprecision.net and look for our online long-range shooting school. So I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to join us here on the podcast. If you enjoy the podcast and you like to share it, we really appreciate it. If you like to leave a nice review, appreciate it as well. We know we might get lambasted a little bit on our promotion of smaller calibers and our concept of trying to go with the smallest caliber you think you can get by with. But then again, we love to shoot and we love to promote shooting, and we want to keep people in our sport, especially the younger shooters or the people that are sensitive to recoil. We just want to be the other voice on the other side of the fence that says, hey, yes, there is lots of ways you can approach this. There are a lot of people that are very heavily opinionated. We just like to shoot, and we want you to go out and enjoy yourself and put the shot where it's supposed to be. The next podcast, we're going to dive into the big 224s, which I'm sort of excited about because I'm totally hooked on them. And then we'll actually follow that up with some video work at the range. So we'll talk about the bigger calibers in 224 that we think would be really good choices for new and experienced shooters. So looking forward to talking to you in the next podcast. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host, and you're listening to Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.